good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to those across the pond and around the world. You are listening to Earth Changes TV Radio Hour. My name is Mitch Battros, and I am your host. You have reached the #1 news source for space weather and Earth science. Join us as we explore the latest breaking news, which in fact affects us all. We are live every Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to 10 p.m. Pacific Time. You will hear the latest breaking news and research from the top minds in their respective fields. We will hear from solar and astrophysicists, seismologists, volcanologists, climatologists, paleontologists, and the list goes on and on. On Earth Changes TV, we also explore recent and historical records spanning thousands and even millions of years. We also invite the brightest minds in the study of ancient text and civilizations. We will hear from Mayan and Hopi elders who tell us of prophecy and their historical observations, which have been passed down from generation to generation, often telling us with stunning accuracy of today's times. Never before have the two worlds of science and ancient text joined together with such unity and precision, outlining a pathway of discovery. Well, welcome, folks, to this live broadcast. Here we are, December 8th. And I've got a great guest for you tonight. We're going across the pond over to England tonight. And I've got Piers Corbyn, who will be giving us some incredible news. I'm going to introduce him in just a second, but staying with tradition, I'm going to go over a few breaking news items, and away we go. Tropical cyclone Fanus threatens south coastal Tamil Nadu. This is in India. The depression over southeast Bay of Bengal capitulated itself to become a tropical cyclone on Wednesday, just yesterday, and it was assigned the name Fanus. I'm not sure what Fanus means. Maybe it's just a name. I don't know if there's any relevance to the name, nor do I even know if they follow the alphabet. Sorry about that, folks. I think they might, but F seems awfully small in numbers, if indeed they do. But I have a feeling my guest might have the answer to that, so we'll get with him in just a minute. Islanders prepare to flee as volcano erupts. And this is Vanuatu residents were today on standby to evacuate a remote South Pacific island in the Vanuatu region after a volcano started to pump clouds of toxic gases. Oh, and that's another thing, folks. If you read my article, and I have a feeling my guest tonight is going to remind us just how much volcanoes contribute to this so-called global warming. Did they forget to put that in? I believe they did. But we'll get back around to that in just a minute. I'm going to have a guest on from a NASA news release. Just came over the lines 3 days ago, telling of basically the super-duper Doppler weatherman. New study showing an unprecedented view of upper atmosphere disturbances during space storms as it relates to the Sun-Earth connection. John Foster, principal investigator of the NASA release, filed the following report. The near-Earth space environment is filled with plasma formed when the sun's ultraviolet rays electrify, known as charged particles, the upper parts of the Earth's atmosphere. And then there's this chain of events that occurs that, of course, you'll note in my equation. So that will be very, very exciting. Broken Hill, which is an area, declared natural disaster. This is in Australia. We have many Australian listeners, absolutely, and I am putting Australia on my list for the book signing and PowerPoint lecture display. That's going to be fun for me, too. More on that later. Broken Hill has been once again declared a natural disaster after a massive storm felled trees and tore roofs off homes 1 month after what they call a mini cyclone ripped through the far west region. Well, extreme weather continues on. In the Philippines, flood kills 2 and affect thousands. In Manila, floods triggered by heavy rains in the Philippines have killed 2 and affected more than 100,000 people. Well, it's not the monsoon season, which I believe is May, June, I think. So, again, simply signs of changing cycles, folks. And we're going to really go into that in a minute. Finally, record low temperature seen in parts of the U.S. This comes out of Denver. Bitterly cold air poured southward across the nation's midsection yesterday, Wednesday, dropping temperatures to record lows from Montana to Illinois. That's right, folks. Quote, record lows. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, aren't we in global warming? Oh, my goodness. And they're talking about record low temperatures. The mercury dived to a record 45 degrees below zero. Holy cow. At Yellowstone, West Yellowstone in Montana, the frequently cold spot at the west entrance to Yellowstone National Park. The old record was set on December 7th, 1927, when it was 39 degrees below zero. Yes, below zero. Okay, I'm gonna stop there because I'm anxious to get to my guest as well as you are, I'm sure. His name is Piers Corbyn. He's a British astrophysicist and meteorologist. Piers explains why he doesn't believe a global warming is caused by the rising levels of carbon dioxide. He relies on the sun to predict future weather using his revolutionary solar weather technique. The solar weather technique is a procedure using predictable links between solar activity and weather. Particles are ejected from the sun, and these particles generate the changes in solar wind, which is this rush of charged particles we talk about. That's, this plume that comes from solar flares, CMEs, and so forth, which also allows him to predict changes in the weather. Well. Although he's thousands of miles across the pond, isn't it interesting how close our studies are? Piers, I want to welcome you to the show.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Or good evening.
Well, it's good.
Yeah, it's morning here, it's evening there, yes. It's 5 a.m. here.
That's right, folks. Can you, he is a trooper. It's 5 a.m. Exactly where are you, Piers?
I'm in London.
Oh, you're in London, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on to the show. It's a pleasure for myself, and I think the audience is going to love this as well.
Okay.
As I most often do, Piers, is there anything you'd like to mention about the breaking news events of the day?
Well, I suppose the breaking news of the day in terms of human activity is this mad conference going on in Montreal, where basically a lot of propaganda is coming out to try and justify the theories from the global warmers that man is causing everything that happens. Warm weather, cold weather, all extremes and so on seem to be laid at the foot of man-made carbon dioxide. Now, our own researchers show that this is just not a tenable proposition.
What are they calling this function? And where is it again?
Pardon?
Is there?
Well, it's in Montreal. They've got these climate change talks to try and find a negotiated path of control of carbon dioxide.
I see. Okay, is it something to the extent of an IPCC or?
Yeah, that thing, yes.
Okay.
IPCC, successor to Kyoto,
That's
so
right.
this is a United Nations sponsored meeting.
Well, you sure caught my attention, Piers. Oh, by the way, I want to let you know who introduced me to you. It's Dr.
Yep.
Gary Sharp.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, absolutely. Gary's been on the show several times.
Yes, I communicate with him through the International Climate Skeptics email discussion group.
Excellent, excellent. And you come highly recommended, and I really have a great deal of respect for Gary, so it's all good.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's go right into it, Piers, because I'm
Okay.
looking at some of your material now, and here's the latest one, folks. It's matter of fact, it was just released today. The title of it is "Global Warming Claims Are, quote, Wild and Refutable," say scientists. Global warming, quote, advisors have the same grip on reality as King Canute's advisors. Who's King Canute?
Well, he was a king in England at about 1050 or so AD, and he was surrounded by courtiers who always want to flatter him, and they said he was more powerful than anything, and he could control nature. They told him that he could stop the tide. They said, your lordship, you're so powerful you could stop the tides. Now he knew this was nonsense, and they were just trying to flatter him. So he said, yes, all right, we will try this out. And he put his throne on the sea, by the sea, and told the tide to not come in.
I see.
But the tide did come in, and he got wet.
Exactly. What a great, wonderful choice.
This is what's happening now in the modern global warming lobby, is that these so-called expert advisors are saying that mankind is controlling the weather and just has to change its carbon dioxide emissions, and then you won't get any more tropical storms or cold spells or hot spells or whatever. And it is just nonsense.
Pretty scary analogy on many levels, one of which is up until the last, the Bush presidency, I really would not have thought that science would have sold out so rapidly.
Well, I agree.
To politics.
But it's run by interest groups. I mean, the global warming lobby, in terms of the science that emanates from it, is dominated by a self-interested group of climate scientists who will not debate in public. They will never debate in public. Last year I was in Moscow, for example, and Sir David King was present. He's Britain's chief scientific advisor, their chief King Canute advisor, if you like. He was at a big meeting in Moscow where some quite reasonable questions were asked of him, and rather than answer them, he walked out of the meeting and declared he had to go and see a minister.
Oh, my goodness.
And he'd been invited there by President Putin's advisor on these matters, and he just refused to answer questions from people around the world, which included people from Britain, of course.
Sad indeed. Piers, looking at part of your resume and CV, it looks like you came through the mainstream sciences. At what point did you break free? Was it a peak experience, a moment of clarity, or was it a gradual thing that you started to notice that that the cabal, and we're very familiar with the blackballing that goes on through peer reviews, was alive and well, and that at some point you chose to go a different direction?
Well, it was a gradual process, really. I mean, since I was very young, I'd always known I'd read that there was apparently some sort of correlations between solar activity, that meaning sunspot numbers and things like that, and the weather, and there were cycles in both that appeared to be similar. So I studied this for a very long time, and found that it wasn't that straightforward, but nevertheless there did appear to be connections. And then in the last decade or so, this been more and more mounting public proposition that man is responsible for everything going on around him, a bit like how the powers that be believed that in Galileo's time, that man was the centre of the universe and so on. And it just became more and more obvious to me that in fact this is incorrect, and that there are found ways in which one could predict how changing solar activity would lead to changes in weather and actually make forecasts. And of course I was convinced that the way I was doing things was working, and that the man-centered view of the universe, or certainly weather systems, is incorrect.
Yeah, no kidding. But what amazes me, Piers, is how obvious it is, with the enormous amount of evidence showing otherwise, as it relates to not only the sun, which I give the most emphasis to, as you do, but also volcanoes, which emit an enormous amount of carbon. And not to mention, 20 other things I could put on a list that contribute to the so-called global warming. What are your thoughts?
Well, absolutely right. I mean, if you look at geology, then the thing which is incredible is that how efficient the biosphere is as a suction machine to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. I mean, sea life and land life absorbs the carbon dioxide, and volcanoes, of course, are emitting vast amounts over the time, over millions of years, as do lots of other things. But the biosphere absorbs this and turns it into cells, and in the sea, of course, it eventually gets turned into calcium carbonate shells and then into chalk. So you can see the White Cliffs of Dover and limestone mountains all over the place, all of which have been living things at a time. And the biosphere is just a huge, very efficient suction machine which extracts carbon dioxide. And the idea that man can sort of overrule this is just ridiculous. I mean, what happens is that when man produces extra carbon dioxide, it just gets absorbed more quickly, and the rate at which it's absorbed by the biosphere is primarily dependent on temperature. So it's not surprising when you look at geological history that, generally speaking, that carbon dioxide levels changes follow changes in temperature. So when temperature goes up, then carbon dioxide levels go up, then temperature goes down, and followed by that, carbon dioxide levels go down. So the global warmers' way of looking at things is a tail-wagging dog way of looking at science.
Folks, for those of you just tuning in, you are listening to a live interview. We're going across the pond tonight over to London, England. You're listening to Piers Corbyn, who is an astrophysicist. I forgot to. Excuse me. Let me back up before I got to. There it is. He is a astrophysicist and meteorologist, and with that kind of background, he had to hit some turbulence trying to break free from many of the mainstream. And Piers, what I wrote about, actually I've written several articles about this, that there's this mentality that the global warmists are unfortunately successfully doing, and that is creating an evildoer. In other words, just like our idiot president said at one time, one of his most popular speeches, you're either with me or you're with the terrorists.
Yeah.
Well, the global warming idiots are doing the same thing. You're either with me or you're with the pollutionists, with the nasty, evildoer polluters. How do you handle that?
Well, it is very difficult, but I've been to meetings. For example, I was in a meeting some years ago, and I think this was something which really sort of tipped me over into the current frame of mind that I have got. I was in a meeting in Imperial College where there was a very, clever guy who was doing measurements on the speed of sound in the sea. And there were microphones all over the world and records and so on. And he was measuring the speed of sound going across the sea in different directions, different parts of the sea, in order to work out the temperatures, because the speed of sound depends see. The purpose of this, and it was been funded by the IPCC or somebody. The purpose of it was to look for a global warming signal, that is, some increase in temperature. Anyway, in the audience, somebody pointed out, he said, well, yeah, this is fine, but you see, there's a lot of other things going on, and you've got these different cycles of variation, you've got the different currents, and these signals are just going to be much bigger. These other signals, he said, oh yes, they are, yes, these signals about ocean currents, they are much bigger, and in fact, those are the ones I'm really interested in. And the rest, this global warming stuff, I don't really rate that, but let's not have this pass beyond these four walls.
That's right.
So what he was saying is that the theory that was funding him was nonsense. He knew it was nonsense, and he was going to shut up about it and take the money. And you know, this is the way which a lot of science in England, in fact around the world, is now gripped. It's become a religion. So anybody who does anything has to say, oh yes, of course, global warming is the problem. Now, I've read some scientific articles which you read the heading and you think, oh my God, it's the end of the world again. And then you read through the article and you find actually the article doesn't relate to the heading, but not very well. But in fact has got information in it which could even refute the heading. Exactly. But the way it's written is to justify a mantra that man is contributing to climate change, or in fact leading it through his carbon dioxide, and that this evil has to be dealt with, and the consequence, of course, is various measures which would either bring in nuclear power or would control trading of carbon around the world and create a market from which...
Absolutely. Here's a perfect example of that, Piers. Actually, it's an international study, so you probably received this as well. But I want to highlight how they twist these things, where the title of the article is so manipulated that does not reflect the study at all. Here's the title of the article. The title of the article is "More CO2 Now Than Past 650,000 Years." Now, what this guy's talking about is his name is Edward Brooks from Oregon State University. He's talking about the study that came from Thomas F. Stocker of the Physics Institute of University of Bern in Switzerland.
Right.
And he says all things. Now but listen what he omitted from his conjecture, which was directly in the Bern Switzerland report, quote, "The record also indicates that the oldest two periods between frigid glacial eras were cooler and lasted longer than the more recent interglacials. The older interglacial periods persisted for 20,000 to 30,000 years, in contrast to more recent periods, which lasted about 10,000 years. The research shows that nature can generate warm interglacial phases that are long, with corresponding greenhouse gases that are stable." In other words, the result of his study, this comes from Thomas S. Stocker, that what we're seeing is a natural cycle.
That's right, exactly. But the heading doesn't bear that out. Well, I think that is the most interesting thing about the last 500,000 years in terms of climate and carbon dioxide is exactly what you say, that the colder periods have had less carbon dioxide and the warm periods have more carbon dioxide, but in all the examinations show that first of all the temperature changes and then the carbon dioxide changes. And the natural, or the most, the situation the world is in most of the time is that of ice age. And the last 500,000 years, there's been, we're in the fifth warm period, which each of these warm periods lasts a few thousand years, and between it you have tens of thousands of years of ice age. And in fact, this warm period we're in now is the fifth coolest, if you like, of the last five, and we are in the latter half of a warm spell, and we're in the coldest part of a warm spell. which started about 9,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, and up to 1,000 years ago it was about 2 degrees warmer than now. And the last 700 years have in fact been the coldest part of the the coldest part of this current warmer spell. So we're in the coldest part of the fifth coolest warmer spell in the last 500,000 years. And all that's happening now is that it's just getting a bit warmer. So if you like, the world is partially returning towards the warmer period it was in from 9,000 years ago to 1,000 years ago. And we're meant to say that man has caused this. Well, this is just silly.
No kidding. I do want to ask you more about other influences such as the sun.
Yes.
2 weeks ago I had a public debate with live on the air with Dr. Jonathan Overpeck. He's a paleoclimatologist, professor of geosciences at the University of Arizona. He's also the director of the ISPE Earth Studies. So we went head-to-head, and we were discussing, in part, his own published papers that were tossed around the media for quite a time, and the recent ice core readings.
Yep.
And just to give you an example, Piers, you're going to get a kick out of this. As we're in the middle of this debate, and I gave him equal time, didn't interrupt him, was very polite. And then I said, well, what about other influences, Dr. Overpeck? You are familiar with the recent solar activity that has emitted significant charged particles and quite an enormous shift in our weather. And what do you think of those pictures from the Soho? His answer was, what's Soho?
Oh, I see. Good heavens, yeah.
What's Soho? I couldn't believe my ears. So, Piers, please tell us. I was shocked to realize how many geoscience folks out there, scientists, do not really understand space weather.
Yeah,
what can you tell us about that?
Hello?
Yes. What can you tell us about the contribution of space weather into our warming and cooling trends?
Well, as far as we can see, it is absolutely fundamental. In this paper which I presented at the Russian Academy of Sciences and then at various places in England, such as the Institute of Physics and recently around some universities like the University of Kent, we've shown that if you analyse world temperatures in terms of the double sunspot cycle, which is about 22 years, the magnetic cycle, take averages of world temperatures, this is the official IPCC figures, take those over the double sunspot cycle, or the Hale cycle as it's called, and you also take an average of the geomagnetic activity over those same periods, then you find an astounding correlation. The averages over those periods show a tremendous correlation going back for the last, over all time that these have been accurately measured, the last 100 or so years. And they go up and down together, and carbon dioxide just sort of follows generally rising. So you can't argue from these correlations that carbon dioxide is somehow controlling world temperatures, because if you say that, then you've also got to explain why carbon dioxide therefore appears to be somehow controlling what happens on the sun.
Yes.
Which of course is a nonsense.
Absolutely. We need to pause for a cause. We're at the bottom of the hour, and we're going to take just about a minute and a half off here. When we come back,
okay.
I'm going to ask my guest, Piers Corbyn, again, to highlight how politics, and unfortunately, folks, here in America, we have elections coming up next year for Congress and Senate, and that's going to get nasty. And already we have Hillary Clinton and, I can't remember who went with her. Was it McCain? I think it was John McCain, up to Alaska and talked with the, I think they pronounce it Inuit tribe.
Oh, yeah.
And Piers has something to say about that. So when we come back, we're going to see, unfortunately, how science is being hijacked by politics. Stand by. And welcome back. I can see quite a few folks have joined us here at the bottom of the hour. Welcome to all. We are broadcasting live around the world. Welcome to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, several from Korea. And I don't know why, but great, you're welcome. And many others, of course, around the world, Switzerland, and I could go on and on and on. I have a great guest tonight. His name is Piers Corbyn, and he is an astrophysicist and meteorologist. And I can imagine, again, what he must have had to go through. And, you know, folks, I understand the concept and experience of peer reviews. And when you go outside of main thought, if you will, and what creates main thought? Money. the ones who put the grants out for particular studies, and they kind of guided, unfortunately, with politics. And he evidently is really quite the stormbuster over there in Europe, stirring it up, keeping them honest, with all the global warming zealots in the European nations. And he comes forward with some very strong evidence, not unlike what you see here on Earth Changes TV, refuting this dogma. As you heard Piers Corbyn say earlier, it's really turned into a religion, and that's too bad. When at the bottom of the hour, folks, I was mentioning there was a study in Alaska, and I found out some information recently about this too, and evidently Piers has looked into this himself. Now let's hear what he has to say. Piers, welcome back to the show.
Yes. Yeah, well, the important thing about Alaska is that between 9,000 years ago and 1,000 years ago, it was much warmer than currently. And indeed, Greenland is called Greenland because when the Vikings discovered it, it was much warmer than now and relatively fertile and farmable. Now, the global warmers are currently claiming that a 1 or 2 degrees temperature rise would take the Arctic into something it's never been in before, and the rate at which temperatures in the Arctic have been rising are unprecedented in history. Well, this statement is just untrue, and the people that are making this statement actually know it is untrue, because the records show, and these are from NOAA, and by these international bodies that monitor temperatures in the Arctic, it shows that between, for the 100 years just before about 1000 or 1020 AD, world temperatures, or the Arctic temperatures, certainly were rising at about a rate of 0.7 degrees centigrade per century, which is the same rate as they've been rising right now. And they reached a level which is notably higher than now, and about the same as the alarming levels they say are going to be reached if the world or the Arctic carries on warming. Now, they've been saying in public that this means that polar bears are going to die out. Well, this is a lie, because polar bears didn't die out between 9,000 years ago and 1,000 years ago. Neither did they die out in the 4 previous warm periods that have happened like that in the last 500,000 years.
there you have it, folks.
Nonsense, which is put there to serve a political purpose, which appears to me to be actually impose a kind of, well, all scare stories. We live in a world climate, a political climate of fear, where fear stories or fear religions drive everything. I mean, this is enabling the creation of a market for carbon credit trading. Now, all markets mean that somebody in charge of the market makes money. So, the carbon credit trading market and the control of third world economies which ensues means that the advanced world carries on being in control, and that is really what it's about. And these stories that the oil companies are somehow supporters of people like me that are critical of global warming theory is just not true.
It's not true.
I mean, the oil companies, in fact, they do want to know what is going on, but they've realised that the global warming scare story is actually to their advantage now, and they can make trillions of dollars by engaging in carbon sequestration, as they call it, i.e. they can extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, pump it into the seabed, and the taxpayer, where it's going to be safe, they say, you see, and the taxpayer will pay for this.
Piers, do you happen to know the history of Michael Crichton? How did he gain such insight into all this and capture it in his book? I think it's called State of Fear.
Yes, I don't know his origins. I mean, he just sort of read and studied things as people who reach conclusions do. I mean, he was an independent mind.
Boy, he just nailed it.
Well, absolutely, yes. Yes.
Very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that worries me about the way science is going now is that the global warmers have got a kind of religion going so that they can seize on every event and claim
Oh, they do, Piers. Here in America, I'm very serious when I tell you this. If you were to go, of course I do it because I love it, but most people don't like to cause conflict, so they try to avoid it.
Oh, yeah.
But if you were to go out and say this global warming stuff is crap, they see you as a polluter. Unfortunately, the global warming environment has successfully correlated the term global warming, which is a made-up name by James Hansen in 1988. They equate it to pollution, and when you try to tell them otherwise, it's like sacrilege.
That's right. Well, see, carbon dioxide himself is, in the way I think of things, is not a pollutant at all. In fact, carbon dioxide is the basis of life. If we didn't have any carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, there would be no life. Grass wouldn't grow, animals wouldn't eat it, and so on. That would be the end of the world. So it is the basis of life. They just link that with all other activity of man, like producing soot and so on, and say, well, it's produced by man, so it must be bad. Now, I don't accept this view of the world.
Piers, I didn't come into the game till really late, until 1997. Were you around? So I really don't know what happened in 1988 when James Hansen did his trip on Congress. What is your take on all that? What's now known as the broken hockey stick? How on earth did he get away with such garbage?
Well, I think, you see, with any theory in science, or indeed any theory, that if it fits into an economic interest, then it will get promoted. And what happened then was a kind of triangle developed. You had, I mean, some of the scientists that found what he was talking about at first believed it. In fact, it probably seemed to be true to them. So they put forward this apparent thing that the world was warming, and then they add on the theory, it looks like man is causing this because carbon dioxide is going at the same time. And then they start attributing various extreme weather events to man's activity, and then of course you have news. So once you've got scientists saying man is causing bad things, then politicians will jump in and say, good heavens, this is something we've got to worry about.
Yes.
And then the scientists will say, we need some money to research this, and the politician says yes, and then the media report it and say this is very important now. These scientists are doing things to save the planet, and the whole thing goes around and around. So you have a self-interested group of of course is also related to people who want to, stop soot and acid rain and so on, and everything has got sort of lumped together under a global warming, save the planet, do good to the world, religious umbrella, which is so amorphous that it can be used to justify anything. So if in Europe, when there's floods in the summer, they say there's global warming, when it's hot weather in the summer, they say it's global warming. And then they now even say, oh yes, if there's going to be a cold spell, then it's caused by global warming. It's just getting mad. It is. And then they're starting saying, oh yes, the whole Gulf Stream might switch, and if it's
what is with this
global
Gulf?
warming, they have this complicated story. Well, excuse me. In fact, if you just look at the facts about the last time the Gulf Stream did switch for a period of time, or partially switch, which is in the 1600s, that was associated with what's called the Maunder minimum of solar activity. So it was very, very low solar activity, very few sunspots for 50 or 100 years.
Yes.
And that was the main thing you could look at, which seemed to be associated with with a switch in the Gulf Stream. It was nothing to do with mankind.
Well, I'll tell you. Just one last word on this, the Inuit, or Inuit.
Oh, Inuit, yes. Oh,
yes.
Well, I'm not sure how you pronounce it either. But, yes, you see, there is a history to these tribes, and when the global warmers talk about it, their history stops just after 1000 AD. They don't talk about what happened before that. Now, I don't know if there's much writing or anything, but obviously the Inuit survived the warmer period from 9,000 years ago to 1,000 years ago. It's not the case that their way of life will have to end if it gets as warm as that, because it didn't end before.
That's right. I've actually received emails from the tribe, Piers, and again, like the magic of television, they go and interview 6 people out of 3,000, and there's really quite a number who are laughing at these ridiculous statements.
Well, of course they're getting money for it. I mean, they get world attention, so they'll shut up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nonsense. I don't know what is written about their earlier history in medieval times, but that is something which ought to be investigated to find out how they did cope with a warmer natural world then. But they certainly did cope.
Sure did. All right, I'm going to change subjects now, Piers, and I folks, for those of you just tuning in, you're listening to a live interview all the way from London. We're going across the pond tonight to London, England, and yes, it is. This guy is a trooper. It is like, coming up on 6 a.m. Where he is, and I certainly appreciate that, and I know you do too. His name is Piers Corbyn, and he is with WeatherAction. I'm going to ask about his services. I certainly want to get that out there. But first, this hot topic appears a lot about, and it really upset me because I personally really like President Clinton, and it really bugged me when him and Senior Bush got together and got on Larry King and all these shows, saying that global warming caused Katrina and all these other hurricanes. How are you handling this? These people who are saying that global warming is the cause of the hurricanes.
Well, it is insane. It makes me really angry, and when I see this on television, I get very, very cross. But you see, the fact, actually, just counting hurricanes, show that in the last 30 years or 40 years, there's been the decadal rate at which hurricanes and tropical storms have been happening in the Gulf of Mexico is 30% lower than it was in the first half of this century. Mm-hmm. Lower. There's actually less of them. Mm-hmm. Yet the global warmers' quasi-religious grip on science and the media means that anything that happens, they just attribute it to man's activity. And I've seen people on TV saying, yes, Katrina was caused by mankind. Well, it's complete rubbish. I mean, the New Orleans is built below sea level anyway, and it was known for 50 years that sometime there was bound to be a storm which would hit New Orleans, and that would be the end of New Orleans, and that has happened. And the reason why there's been more storms this year is nothing to do with mankind, and it's because we're in a La Nina phase of world climate circulation. And in La Nina phases, you get more storms and more powerful storms. And in the El Nino phases, which are essentially warmer phases, you actually get less storms. So there's an anti-correlation between world temperatures or tropical temperatures and tropical storms. This is America. Those are the facts. But the global warming lobby is so powerful, and the interest groups around it are so powerful, they even turn facts on their head.
You crack me up. Okay. There's some other areas that I find interesting, and I think you probably do as well, related to this. Now, I did interview the chief editor of the what we call the Farmer's Almanac. Do you have a Farmer's Almanac in England?
No, we don't.
Are you familiar?
I've heard about this.
It seems to be pretty darn accurate. It's been around for 1,000 years. No, I'm sorry. Did I say 1,000? No,
I don't think printing's been going on.
I think 100 years.
More likely, yes.
And I had him on the show 2-3 months ago, and I must confess that their accuracy rate is pretty darn good, around 85%. Some would argue that, arguably 85%. And guess what? Part of their methods of prediction, solar cycles.
Yeah.
And he did say that Europe and the east coast of our east coast here in the United States will probably experience a pretty severe winter. What are your thoughts? What do you think the European weather is going to be like?
Well, yeah, it's interesting what he says about the east coast of the USA and Britain, and some similarities because they're on the same side of an ocean and so on. But the correlations between them aren't that good. No, when I first did studies of solar activity in the weather, it was a sort of more broad brush thing about, winters and summers. But now we can go into much, much more detail, and we can predict when we get what's called red spikes in the solar wind. Red spikes is our concept, but it means essentially things like shock waves in the solar wind of particles. And when there's a lot of these, you're more likely to get tornado and rapid storm developments and more circulation. And we can predict these times. Now, this winter, we do long-range forecasts many months ahead, which will talk about the weather developments in Britain down to time periods of a few days, and we can also predict likely times of formation of tropical storms in the Caribbean. Well, in terms of British weather, we've been very successful and are about 85% accurate according to our users, some of which are farmers, of course, and others are in energy industry. Now, we've sold, of course, long-range forecasts for this winter, so we're not going to go into detail, but we find that, in fact, it's not going to be a particularly cold winter overall. There are going to be some cold spells, but there's going to be quite a lot of red spikes, as we call them, and solar activity, so that the circulation is going to be frontal activity quite high, quite often, and which is going to mean because of the way it's going to happen in Europe, there's going to be quite a lot of south winds at times in the British Isles, so it is going to be overall quite warm. There are going to be some times when you get northerly Arctic things with lows stuck in the North Sea, and then it will be warmer or milder in Scandinavia and colder in Britain. But these periods of time aren't going to be very long. So the prognosis of a very cold winter in Britain and Europe is not correct for this coming winter.
Well, let's thank you. And so let's go into your services.
Yeah.
You do provide a weather forecasting service, and I can imagine if I was an investor in commodities, for example, I would certainly want to contact you for investment.
Well, yes, we have had discussions with people on that, but to do that we need to develop a proper model for the whole world. Now, we can do that, but it takes time. We can currently do very well at forecasting Britain and Europe, and we know some of the companies which buy our forecast are involved in energy trading and commodities. trading commodities, you have to be very careful and know what they're doing, because there's quite often other things going on as well. So you might have a weather effect, indeed, which will be correct, but then a war or a run on some currency happens, so that what a speculator thought was going to happen didn't happen.
Well, tell us more about your service and any products that you have available. I'd like to.
Yeah, well, we have long-range forecasts for the British Isles, which includes graphical representation of temperatures, rainfall, and sky cover over each month. And each month is broken down into about eight weather periods, and we produce these forecasts up to about a year ahead. We have done forecasts more than a year ahead of extremes, and those have been proved to be accurate by independent academic monitors who in fact monitored these for insurance companies who wanted to see how accurate we were, and therefore if it was usable, and it proved that we were. So anyway, what we do, we sell these forecasts in a summary form, which may be, say, 7 months ahead, 9 months ahead, and put in more detail as we go along. Although we can produce quite a lot of detail up to a year ahead. The timings may change a little bit as we get nearer to events, but not very much, as long as we spend enough time doing the calculations. And the most significant things we can do is the advent of extremes, because these come from a combination of special events on the Sun and Sun-Earth connections. So we can predict periods of storms and cold spells quite well, in fact very well.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and
just email us.
WeatherAction News?
Info at or Piers at WeatherAction.com.
Say that one more time.
Weather as in W-E-A-T-H-T, weather as in sun and rain and so on. Action as A-C-T-I-O-N. So it's just one word, WeatherAction.com. And you can put info at WeatherAction.com or Piers at WeatherAction.com, and we can send people samples of what we do for Europe, and we can also talk about other bits around the world which can be developed and have been developed a little bit as far as tropical storm formation is concerned, for example.
There has been this ebb and flow of climatologists fighting with solar scientists, astrophysicists, and those that know the study of the sun. And so we get hit with 3 or 4 reports of the ice core samples and this Gulf Stream conveyor belt, all this other garbage. But then we get some more substantial news from our solar scientists who remind us of space weather and its significant influence on such. Who do you think is going to win out?
Oh, you mean who's going to win out in terms of what?
Well, it's a political game, and
unfortunately,
I think the global warming zealots have a heads up.
They do. Right now, the global warming zealots are on the ascendancy. But you know, if you think back at the time of Galileo, the religious zealots were on the ascendancy, and the whole of scientific thought then, which is run by the church, was against what he said. But you see, in the end, the truth, will come out, because the problem, of course, is that whatever happened, the global warmers say it's proof of their theory. But you know, if people like me and others constantly nail them and say, okay, what is going to happen, then sooner or later, what they're saying will show.
You know what we need.
True. I mean, it's probably going to be the case, because we have some ideas about the changes of the Earth's magnetic poles, that the Earth will start cooling again in a decade or so, and the global warmers might jump up and down and say it's all because of things they've done or not done, but I don't think people will be convinced, and in fact climate will be changing, and the fact that we can predict things will convince people, and eventually we will win through.
We need to come out with a movie, Piers. Maybe we could call it The Day Before Yesterday. Or even better, my favorite is, we'll call it Solar Rain.
Oh, right. Yeah, that'd be nice.
But yeah, we need to get Hollywood involved. It's amazing how that works. Okay, Piers, we are out of time. I can't thank you enough for staying up or getting up this early.
No, I got up. I didn't stay up till 5 a.m. today.
That's good.
I do sometimes to do forecasting. You know.
I know what you mean. Sometimes I go right through the night myself. Once again, thank you, and keep up the good work. Keep up the fight. I'll do my part over here. You do what you can over there, and
it's a pleasure to be on.
We'll win this battle. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, there you have it, folks. I guess you could call him my British counterpart. It'd probably be a good way to put it, and I certainly wish the best for him. Oh boy, what is this? This is Thursday already, December 8th. Some very exciting news, as you have seen, coming from the solar sciences regarding the sun, and that's good. I'd like to see a whole lot more of it. We have a long way to go. The global warming people really had a huge head start. They're entrenched. Unfortunately, I think that's where most of the grant money is going, and you know, I don't know exactly how the political thing goes. I'm learning how to read it pretty darn well, but don't want to get involved in it. All right, you guys have a great weekend, and we're going to pick this up again next week. And you know what? Next week, by the way, I'm going to change gears. I know many of you like this, you know, as we kind of change into different formats. And let me pull this up. We're going to go into the history of storytelling. That's right, storytelling. I love this topic. I love the art of storytelling, and I think it is such an important part of our civilization and community. Her name is Christina Baldwin, and her book, she has a book out called Story Catcher, and it's about storytelling and what an integral part it played in communities and tribes prior to us, our ancestors. And what a good time of year to do that as well. So that's how we're going to keep the balance. That's going to come up on December 15th. This is Mitch Battros, Earth Changes TV Radio Hour, signing off. Bye-bye.